Hello there. Have you ever thought about icebergs? Have you ever thought about how they can teach you more about how to have successful days and weeks? Well, if you haven't, you're about to find out why you should have been thinking about it more often. Let's jump into this episode of the SPS podcast where we're discussing how to create ultimate weeks and days. Welcome to the Self Performance Strategies podcast. My name is Stephen and I am your host. The SPS podcast is brought to you by the Pro Accelerator Program. Over the last 18 months, dozens of entrepreneurs and business owners have gone through the program and saved at least 10 hours a week while increasing their revenue from $50K all the way up to over $1 million in extra revenue. If that sounds like something you're interested in, follow the links, book a call, and we hopefully help you save some time, reduce your stress, and focus on your high value activities more in your life and business. Now, let's get into this episode. Hello. Welcome. We are in episode 66 of the SPS podcast. Yes, episode 66. And in this episode, how many times can I say episode in the intro of this episode? In this episode, we are going to be discussing how do you have ultimate weeks? How do you create weeks that just allow you to knock it out of the park? And we're going to be using an iceberg analogy to really help you understand how to do that. But before we jump into that, let's share the quote for this episode. And it comes from Henry Kravis. And this quote frames the conversation. And I also have a deep appreciation for it because it hits on one of my key beliefs about self-performance and about improving business and about improving your life. And that's foundational work, having the right foundations. But Henry Kravis, who is a UK billionaire business mogul guy, if you don't know who he is one of the UK's richest people. I think he builds skyscrapers amongst many, many other things. And he said, if you build that foundation, both the moral and ethical foundation, as well as the business foundation and the experience foundation, then the building won't crumble. Now, the reason why I like that quote and resonate with it is because it just hits on the word foundation. I truly believe, and if you've listened to any of the episodes before, you probably already understand this from me. It's the foundations. It's the blueprint. It's getting deep into your real definition of success, your pillars in your life. That is how you create progress for me. I've never met anybody who is absolutely crushing it in all areas of their life that doesn't have those pillars built. And I've met lots of people who may be crushing one or two areas of their life, but the one area of their life they've got out of control, maybe it's family, maybe it's business, maybe it's their health, they have no pillars. If you have the right pillars built and the right foundations built, it just makes shit easier. There's people out there that have fantastic family foundations, but they're shit at business. There's people out there that have fantastic business foundations, but they're shit with their family. They don't spend enough time with them or they're estranged. Whatever that is. We need to have the right foundations in all areas of your life. Morally, ethically, business, life, experience, and your building won't crumble. That's why I love that quote. That's why it's a great quote to really frame this conversation. Because if I was to ask any general person, well, let's be more specific. If I was to ask your general productivity, ChatGPT using content creator, and I say to them, hey, how do you have a good week? I can almost guarantee you they're going to say you start by focusing on your days. You start by focusing on your habits for each day. And I'd be like, no, that's wrong. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't. That is like trying to hit a dart with a dartboard from 8 feet away. Can you imagine that? On the Yoki, the Yoki is the little platform for people who use darts. For those who don't know the game of darts, the Yoki is the little black platform. It's about 8 feet long. But imagine putting a dart on the wall and then having a massive dartboard, a big circular dartboard, and you're just throwing it at that dart. You're trying to get it to stick to the dart. That is what people are teaching you to do when they say that to have good weeks, you start with good days. It's entirely backwards. But that's what I see all the time on LinkedIn and X and other platforms. The ChatGPT productivity posts. You've seen them. You've read them. Stuff with more platitudes than fortune cookies on steroids. And it's all the same ideas you already know. You don't even need to read them to know what they're going to say. They're going to tell you to use time management. They're going to tell you to prioritize your tasks. They're going to tell you to set goals, have balance, stack habits. Yes, sure. Yes, these things help. But they are tactics that only work if you have the right strategy, the right foundations. So what does work? Well, you have to think well beyond your days and weeks if you want to have good days and weeks. Let me repeat that. You have to think well beyond your days and weeks if you want to have good days and weeks. You need to think months, if not a year, if not 18 months out, and work backwards. Because you build good weeks by working backwards from your future goals. That's the hidden secret. Is this revolutionary? No, it's not. But it's not done. It's common sense that's not followed. So it's uncommon sense. I've been there. 100%. I've been there. I know we've all been there. We've fallen into the trap of these shallow ideas and shallow tactics. We focus on the micro without thinking about the macro. We get sucked into these habits. And 12 years ago when I first got into personal development, I did all of those things. I did all those habits, the biohacking habits, the productivity habits. I was fasting, I had morning routine, evening routine, mini breaks to recharge. I was getting good sleep, drinking water, going for walks, eating healthily, tracking my hours, using platitude journey, taking cold showers, getting up at 5 a.m., reciting affirmations, you name it, I've done it. I do a lot of those things still. But the difference between Stephen of 10, 12 years ago, or Stephen of 7 or 8 years ago compared to Stephen of today, is that Stephen actually has a long-term strategy and an ability to use those hacks and systems to grow his business. Now, when I first got into using all these shallow hacks, I was still working a 9 to 5, so it had limitations. I had a lot of extra time because I was working so efficiently, and then I'd get performance punishment within my 9 to 5 because I had room to take on more projects. Then I get overwhelmed. It's kind of dumb shit. But it took me years to actually start something on the side that I could grow. It was actually about 2017 I started a YouTube channel. Talked about it before, maybe in a few episodes. I've got like 200, 300 videos on YouTube. All my podcast episodes go up there as well now. Got about 2,000 subs on there. It's not a platform that I focus on. That allowed me to eventually have the right mindset to jump on X, grow followers, jump on LinkedIn, grow followers, create offers, attract clients. It was my big domino. It was my starting point. It was the start of my journey. But it took me 6 or 7 years of frustration of doing all these positive, how do you have good weeks? Well, you start with good days. I was having good days. I was trying to have good days by doing all these actions, but I was ended up feeling frustrated because I wasn't going anywhere. I was still working the same job. I was being promoted at the same time as other people who were still above the bar of average, but they were definitely below my bar. So I definitely had a lot of benefits from using all these hacks, but there was no rocket ship. There was no ability for me to really take massive leaps forward because I was trapped within limitations. And I'm talking about this as an analogy because I want to really show you, because you're running a business right now, you might be creating those types of limitations on yourself because you don't have any long-term strategy. Because doing all these hacks, these biohacking or productivity hacks or all these positive habits, without having a long-term strategy connected to them, you're running in water. You're running in waist-high water. A lot of effort for a little distance covered. I don't know if you've ever tried to run in water, but it's extremely difficult. Waist high when you're at the beach or when you're in a swimming pool, very, very difficult. A lot of resistance. And the thing is, as I've mentioned, when you first discover personal development or high performance, that's all you see. If you go on Twitter, X, or LinkedIn, you'll see posts from these 6, 7, 8 figure business owners They'll have a little personal story about here are the 7 mindsets that helped me make $1 million in 2022 or 2023. But then when you read the post itself, it's like time management, habit stacking, prioritize your tasks, make sure you have healthy balance. They're tactics. It's like they're not giving you the recipe. They're kind of giving you the picture of the food. You're not even getting to eat the meal because there's nothing really relatable in there. It's not a great dish being served to you. It's a very light version of what actually it takes to win. And this is where the iceberg analogy is going to come in. Yes, finally, I'm talking about the iceberg I set up at the start of the episode. Because when you first get into personal development, it's like seeing an iceberg for the first time. You focus on the ice above the water. You're in awe of this magnificent white island floating in the middle of the sea. You're like, holy shit, that's fucking cool. But then you notice how deep and how far down it goes. How far down that ice goes. You're like, oh my God. You've seen the pictures online. It's amazing. It's like 80-90% of the iceberg is below the water. And some of these things are massive. So just think how much ice is below that. And if you want to have good days and weeks, if you want to have the ultimate week, if you want to have a great life, if you want to improve your business, if you want to improve your life, if you want to start being more effective, that's how deep you've got to go of your foundations and your strategy. You've got to get really deep into your definition of success. You've got really deep into what you want in the next quarter, the next 6 months, the next year, the next 18 months, even go down your whole life vision. Then, once you have that sorted, and you know what your high value and high dollar activities are, and you know exactly what you're doing, then you can use all those systems like time management and prioritization and high energy stuff that allow you to have really high energy days. But then it all combines together in a beautiful symphony of success. And when I did that in my own life, I made giant leaps forward. It transformed my life. I went from a frustrating plateau of hacks and short-term systems to tapping into perpetual momentum. And I want to give you the 4 steps in this podcast very quickly. I want to go through the 4 steps that really helped me do this. Now, I can't go into a very deep, detailed explanation. Obviously, in the show notes below, I'll have a little bit more, or I'll have what I'm saying below here so you can check that out. But I want you to grab your deep sea scuba gear. I want you to get a bigger boat. And we're going to go deep into the iceberg. We're going to go underwater here. We're going to really look at the 4 key steps you should do if you want to improve your days and weeks. You want to ultimate days and weeks. These are the steps that you should take. So the first step that you should do, and it's a step missed by so many people, is reflect and review. Yeah. Reflect and review. Most people start with actions. Most people start with, okay, well, let's plan. Let's get my vision together. Let's do it. It's good, but it's not great. The first thing you do is you should start collecting data. Find your trends. Stack your wings. Wings? Stack your wins. If you can stack, if you have a wing, if you want to stack wings, you can. If you have wings to stack, go ahead and stack your wins and your gains. Why? Because that builds momentum. It lets you know your current situation and direction. You don't create great weeks without the right foundations. There's that word again. Foundations. So once you know what you've done and you've collected data of all of the success you've had and you know where you're trending, that's when you start creating a vision. That's when you start creating a vision. Too many people create visions based on Fugazi. Oh, I want to sign 10 clients in the next month. Okay, well, how many clients did you sign last month? Well, 0. I don't even have an offer or a business. Absolute bullshit. That's not how you set goals. It's not how you set goals. That's why you need to reflect and review. Because you need to find out your trends and your data before you build a vision. Then once you build your vision, and once you know what you want, you define success, you start getting into more deeper actions. You start getting into those plans. You need to plan out your next 90 days. You need to plan out your next 6 months. You want to have excellent days and weeks, you need to know where you're going. You need to highlight your high value and high dollar activities. You need to have structure to your days and weeks and months. You need to select power moves that force you to take action. I might hear one or two of you say, what's a power move? Well, a power move would be like hiring a coach, joining a community, onboarding help, hiring somebody, firing somebody. You're committing, basically. You're either financially, physically, mentally, emotionally committing to something. You're doing an action that is saying this is the direction that we're going to go. This is where we're going. And that's a power move. And a power move is something that's going to shift you. A power move isn't listening to this podcast or buying an audiobook or purchasing a couple of books off Amazon. A power move is investing in a $12,000, $20,000, $30,000 coaching program. A power move is hiring on a new staff member that's going to cost you money. A power move could be firing that staff member that you hired last year that didn't work out. It could be ending a relationship with a loved one or someone who you no longer love. Whatever that is. But these power moves allow you to commit to your actions and plans. But you can't take the right power moves if you don't know your current data from planning, if you don't know your current data from reflecting and reviewing. If you can't make power moves that work if you don't know where you are and if you haven't planned out where you want to go. This is why it's all very important. And do you notice how I'm not even talking about days here or weeks? I'm talking about plans right now. I'm talking about big things. That's how you have fantastic days and weeks. And I hope that penny's dropping for you. Then the third thing that you do, so once you've built your plans, you've got your structure, you've done your power moves, and you're thinking about your weeks and the actions that you want to take, you connect your macro goals with micro actions. You got to build and test. That's the third step. Because you just selected a whole bunch of macro goals. You've selected some power moves. But we need to put micro actions in. You need to make sure that your daily actions are actually moving you towards those goals. Too often I see people with big goals, but no actions, or vice versa. They're taking lots of daily action, but they have no big goals. Remind you earlier what I was talking about in my in this podcast about my life. I fell into that trap. Lots of daily actions in no specific direction is a horrible trap to be in. Doesn't matter how effective all these hacks and systems that you use are. Doesn't matter how effective they are. If you don't have direction, you're hooked. Now this will take work. It does take work. And you'll have to do a lot of adapting and a lot of testing. This stuff isn't easy. It takes dedication. But once you've planned and got your actions based upon your reviewing and reflecting, you build and test, and then you keep adapting those until you get it right. And then the fourth step is that you review and you improve. So it's a succession of steps that allow you to reflect, plan, act, test, and review and improve. You need feedback loops. Weekly and monthly systems that give you feedback, from journaling to business analytics to coaching to team meetings to huddles, whatever it is. You should be collecting data almost daily, weekly, minimum monthly. Because with data, you can make more informed decisions rather than knee-jerk reactions to the wind-changing direction, which happens a lot to people. People make these massive power moves by firing people, hiring people, or investing money in a program just because there was a slight wind change. And then those things go wrong, and it was the wrong decision because they don't have the foundations built, again, using that word again, the foundations that help them make better decisions. And here's the thing, when you flip-flop with your micro actions, you never reach your macro goals. So if your micro actions are always changing, if you're always trying all these different productivity hacks all the time, you're never going to reach your macro goals. But when you align everything together using these 4 steps, when you really go through this in a methodical, planned way, you really think about reflecting and reviewing, you really think about planning and acting, you really think about building and testing, you really think about reviewing and improving, you will create ultimate weeks and days. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. And that's why in my humble opinion, in the 66th episode of the SPS podcast, I think 90% of the productivity advice online for business owners absolutely sucks because it's so shallow. It goes straight to tactics, ignores the foundations, it ignores data, it ignores vision, it ignores culture, it ignores values. And you need all of those things built for the tactics to work. So if you want to have great days and weeks, you got to look way beyond the tip of the iceberg. You got to go way beyond the tip of the iceberg. You got to go deep. You got to go deep into your foundations. You got to go deep into your strategy. So the question I'll leave you with in this episode is, how deep are you going with your foundations? That word again in this episode of the SPS podcast, foundations. How deep are you going with your foundations? Well, that's it. That was the SPS podcast. That was the 66th episode. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, please reach out to me. Send me a DM on Twitter, X, at Steve Timoney. It's at STEVETIMONEY. Or slide on over to my website, which is stephentimoney.com, which is STEPHENTIMONEY.com. And you can check out my newsletter there. You can check out all the other podcast episodes. And you can check out my coaching offer, the Pro Accelerator. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for listening all the way through to this part of the episode. And we will speak to you in the next one. Make it a good one.